13.3 6 Elements of Language. Language is a very important aspect of anyone's public speaking performance. Whether a speaker uses lots of complicated words or words most people have in their vocabularies, language will determine how an audience experiences the speech. To help you think through your language choices, we are going to talk about 6 important elements of language and how they affect audience perceptions. Clarity. The first important element of language is clarity, or the use of language to make sure the audience understands a speaker's ideas in the way that the speaker intended. While language, or verbal communication, is only one channel we can use to transmit information, it is a channel that can lend itself to numerous problems. For example, as discussed earlier, if people have different connotative definitions for words, the audience can miss the intended meaning of a message. Imagine you're listening to a speaker talking, and he or she uses the phrase, quote, older female relatives who become aerodynamic venison roadkill, end quote, or, quote, obese personification fabricated of compressed mounds of minute crystals, end quote. If you're like most people, these two phrases just went right over your head. We'll give you a hint. These are two common Christmas songs. The first phrase refers to Grandma got run over by a reindeer, and the second one is Frosty the Snowman. Notice that in both of these cases, the made-up title with all the polysyllabic words is far less clear than the commonly known one. While you're probably unlikely to deliberately distort the clarity of your speech by choosing such outlandish words to express simple thoughts, the point we're trying to illustrate is that clear language makes a big difference in how well a message can be understood. Economy. Another common mistake among new public speakers is thinking that more words are more impressive. In fact, the opposite is true. When people ramble on and on without actually making a point, audiences become bored and distracted. To avoid this problem, we recommend word economy, or the use of only those words necessary to accurately express your idea. If the fundamental idea you're trying to say is, well, that stinks, then saying something like, while the overall outcome may be undesirable and definitely not recommended, becomes overkill. We do have one caveat here. You want to make sure that your language isn't so basic that it turns off your audience. If you're speaking to adults and using vocabulary appropriate for school children, you will end up offending your audience. So, while economy is definitely important, you don't want to become so overly basic that you're perceived as talking down to your audience. Obscenity. Obscenity, or indecent language, consists of curse words or bad references. While it may be fun to use obscene language in casual conversation with your friends, which I don't recommend, we also cannot recommend using obscene language while delivering a speech. Even if you're giving a speech related to an obscene word, you must be careful with your use of that word itself. Whether we agree with societal perceptions of those words or not, going out of our way to use obscenity will end up focusing the audience on the obscenity and not the message. Obscure jargon or language. Obscure language and jargon are two terms that closely relate to each other. Obscure language refers to language choices that are not typically understood or known by most of your audience. Imagine you're listening to a speech and the speaker says, "Today I've given you a plethora of ideas for greening your workplace." While you may think the word plethora is commonly known, we can assure you that many people have no idea that plethora means many or an abundance of something. Similarly, you may think that most people know what it means to green a workplace, but in fact, many people do not know that it means to make the workplace more environmentally friendly or to reduce its impact on the environment. In the case of this example, plethora simply means the speaker has given many ideas for greening the workplace. You can still use the word plethora, but you should include a definition so that you're sure all of your audience will understand. Jargon, on the other hand, refers to language that is commonly used by a highly specialized group, trade, or profession. For example, there is legal jargon, or the language commonly used by and understood by lawyers. There's also medical jargon, or the language commonly used by and understood by healthcare practitioners. Every group, trade, or profession will have its own specific jargon. The problem that occurs for many speakers is not realizing that jargon is a group, trade, or profession specific and not universal. One common form of jargon is the acronym, or a word formed by taking the first letters of groups of letters of words, such as NASDAQ, which means the National Association of Security Dealers Automated Quotations, PET, the position emission tomography, it's a PET scan, so that's position emission tomography, or IHOP, which is the International House of Pancakes. Another form of jargon is initialism, formed by pronouncing the initials rather than the name of an organization or entity. For example, CDC stands for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. fMRI stands for a Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging, and B of A stands for Bank of America. In political discussions, you can come across various CFRs, or Codes of Federal Regulations. If you're going to use specific acronym or initialism within your speech, you need to explain it the first time you use it. For example, you could say, according to the United States Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, employment discrimination in the Department of Homeland Security is not allowed based on biological sex, religion, sexual orientation, or race. Furthermore, the U.S. CFR does not permit discrimination in receiving contracts based on biological sex, religion, sexual orientation, or race. By defining the jargon upon first mention, we're subsequently able to use the jargon because we can be certain the audience now understands the term. Power. Power is an individual's ability to influence another person to think or behave in a manner the other person would not have done otherwise. Devoto examined how language can be used to help people gain power over others, or lose power over others. He provides examples of both powerful language and powerless language a speaker can use during a speech. Powerless language should be generally avoided in public speaking because it can damage audience perceptions of the speaker's credibility. This is the table of powerful and powerless language. Direct requests is asking the audience to engage in a specific behavior. For example, at the conclusion of today's speech, I want you to go out and buy a bottle of hand sanitizer and start using it to protect your life. Bargaining, an agreement that affects both parties of a situation. For example, if you vote for me, I promise to make sure that our schools get the funding they so desperately need. Ingratiation, attempting to bring oneself into the favor or good graces of an audience. For example, because you are all smart and talented people, I know that you will see why we need to cut government spending. There are also examples of powerless language in this table. I suggest you read those on your own. Variety. The last important aspect of language is variety, or a speaker's ability to use and implement a range of different language choices. In many ways, variety encompasses all the characteristics of language previously discussed in this chapter. Often, speakers find one language device and then beat it into the ground like railroad spikes. Unfortunately, when a speaker starts using the same language device too often, the language device will start to lose the power that it may have had. For this reason, we recommend that you always think about the language you plan on using in a speech and make sure that you use a range of language choices. Key takeaways. Public speakers need to make sure that they are very aware of their language. 6 common language issues that impact public speakers are clarity, economy, obscenity, obscure language, jargon, power, and variety. When public speakers prepare their speeches, they need to make sure that their speeches contain clear language, use as few words as possible to get their point across, avoid obscenity, be careful with obscure language or jargon, use powerful language, and include variety.